Well guys, since we're all under quarantine, I guess I won't be able to read at Literary AF this month. So instead, I'm going to read right here for all of you. And today, we have yet another installment from our favorite family, best known for The Garage and Black Friday. This story is called Toilet Paper Jesus. God damn it, I am not using my hand again, Gary yelled from the restroom. Dad and I glanced at each other. Ever since that week, which shall not be named, there had been a simple rule in the house. Whomever used the last bit of toilet paper had to get the next roll. This had, of course, started simply enough. One was simply forced to get a new roll from beneath the counter. Sometimes it had even required getting a new package from the hall closet. However, there had been darker times. Like several years ago, when yet another excursion was made into the bowels of the garage. Gary had almost lost his thumb, not his brightest moment, and ever since the toilet paper packages had been kept in a back corner of the den. We now, however, found ourselves enmeshed in the madness which was the coronavirus pandemic, and not a single roll was said to exist for miles around. We'd been slow to act as Gary's original overzealousness at having to buy toilet paper last time had resulted in a Costco run the likes of which few had ever seen. We should have known when Gary decided to forego the use of the family Prius for the tour bus instead. The tour bus had been the result of yet another of Dad's impulsive purchases on Craigslist, though it sat mostly in the back and was employed as extra storage/guest room for visiting relatives. The Prius was out of gas, Gary insisted. Dad had grunted his acquiescence and tossed Gary the tour bus keys. If it had not been half full of Dad's rock tumbling supplies, results might have been even worse. As one might imagine, my brother had returned with more toilet paper than the average person might employ in several years, though my family had taken to the challenge with disturbing verve. Mom had, as one might have expected, gotten a sudden urge for crafts. YouTube is a dangerous place when one has too many toilet paper rolls, and the DIY channels are rabbit holes straight to hell. Christmas, birthdays, and even Valentine's Day turned into an ever-rolling behemoth of wreaths, coasters, flowers, lawn decorations, sculptures, and even wall art created mostly from the brown tubes most either throw away or leave in friends' sock drawers as a kind of practical joke. There had also been Dad's insistence toilet paper could be used for everything from napkins to paper towels to regular towels. Yes, he actually replaced our bath towels with wads of white squares for about a week, and all involved spent days digging tiny paper nuggets from our hair. Then there had been the toilet papering of Old Man Winter's place. The gag had seemed innocent enough at first, but by morning, Gary and I had surveyed our handiwork beneath the rising sun and realized the poor fellow would probably wake to the belief that winter had come early in July. I still try to imagine how Gary had managed to weave so many rolls seamlessly between upper tree branches, down into bird feeders, looped through bushes to the mailbox and around the old man's Pontiac, from underneath and back over the top. The car looked like a lump of well-fluffed mayonnaise. The unfortunate rain hours later had turned the entire yard into a soggy, goopy mess investigators believed at first to be some sort of alien terrorist attack. But fun was had by all once Dad finally bailed us out. Suffice it to say, the family managed after several months to reduce our supplies to the point toilet paper was once again necessary, and the rules of replacement held firmly in place. The final roll had lasted entirely too long as it was, and we'd all become used to not having to buy it anymore. Mom's ingenious dabbing technique, something she still has yet to describe, and we prefer it that way, Dad's suspected practice of employing a later sterilized washcloth, my own habit of running down to the gas station if necessary to use the single-ply garbage which passed for toilet paper there, and Gary's uncanny ability to make the most of a single square had somehow stretched the final roll to extents none wished to ponder. The final 3 sheets had lasted several weeks. I had no wish to ask who or how, but there had been tiny nips taken in slow increments until all that remained was the final glued square slowly torn away by someone with much more patience than myself. But Gary's hollering told us all the game was finally up. He had used the final bits. Dad and I glanced away as Gary entered the living room, having apparently done whatever was necessary with the tiny nibs remaining. There was shame in our visages as we refused to make eye contact. "I need help," Gary said with a quiver in his voice. "Come on, Gare, you've done it before," I said with little force in my voice. "You know damned good and well it's going to be a bitch," Gary growled. I grimaced, taking a glance up at him. The tassels of that stupid hat still dangled on both sides of his head. He'd refused to take it off ever since escaping from the garage. "Dude, it's toilet paper," I said, still trying to sound nonchalant, but I knew the truth. It was the time of the coronavirus. Although the full force of social distancing hadn't hit us yet, the news had informed us that every roll of toilet paper in existence now sat under lock and key in our neighbors' basements from here to the next county. No doubt Old Man Winters had a lot of it, having bought pallets of the stuff either in the hopes of keeping us from ever accessing it again for the rest of time, or perhaps for the future possibilities of vengeance. We'd watched any number of idiots in the neighborhood unloading truckloads of the stuff into their front doors and garages. But we had so much for so long, the very idea had seemed absurd. That is, until now. When I got up as if to go to my room for something incredibly important, Gary gave me the puppy dog eyes. This was a strategy he had employed since childhood, an expression created for and tested mostly on Mom, but he'd used it to great avail with Dad and me as well. Ever since his rescue from the garage, the effect had been magnified 1,000 times, and I, who perhaps was the most immune to his antics, had been forced to acquiesce on many occasions. This was the moment Gary decided to give us both barrels of the droopy-eyed shame. He stared at the ground for a full minute, shuffling his feet, and peeked up at us without lifting his head until we'd all glanced up. Then he laid it on thick. In one elongated moment, he picked up his head, sad, unblinking, yes, bigger than any hound dog one is ever likely to meet, and poured his despair onto us with such sincerity, even I couldn't refuse. "Fine," I finally shouted, stretching out my back and shoulders. Dad breathed a disturbingly audible sigh of relief. Mom just smiled her peroxide smile as if to say, "I'm glad you strapping lads are here to do these annoying little things." "Fantastic," Gary said, his huckleberry hound face replaced with astonishing speed by a wide grin. Instead of the tour bus or the Prius, we decided on Dad's pickup. While we not only had little chance of locating the ridiculous mass he had managed before, we certainly hoped for more than a mere 4-pack, or even a 6 or 8-pack. In these times, one might as well plan for the absolute worst. "You gonna protect yourself?" Gary asked. "I'm out of ammo," I said, recalling how I'd run through my entire stock of 9mm rounds, trying to bring down a drone which spent the better part of 20 minutes trying to get a video of me attempting to inflate a pool in the backyard without the aid of an electric pump. "Not that kind of protection," Gary said, punching his "Not that kind of protection," Gary said, punching head and arm holes in a garbage bag. "Protection from the virus." "Kind of small, isn't it?" I asked, trying to imagine what sort of armor he would employ next. "The smallest," he said, turning another garbage bag into a makeshift pants and going for the duct tape. Little buggers get through anything, he said, donning a full respirator mask from the garage. What am I supposed to wear? I asked, sealing up my wrists and legs with what was left of the duct tape and pulling on a pair of dishwashing gloves. Just use a bandana, Gary said, his voice distant and muffled by the respirator. Right, I said, wrapping one of Mom's doilies about my face. He gave me a thumbs up and ascended the ladder-like protrusion that was the step into Dad's pickup. As you may know, Dad went through the occasional survival phase. It was something which occurred almost annually, usually predicated by watching the news, doomsday preachers, or his Facebook feed. It had many times resulted in the procurement of various sundry camping, hiking, and hunting-themed items, which often turned into conversation pieces around time of the holidays. That or packing materials, it really just depended. Not only was the garage still filled with enough army rations to keep a small battalion well nourished through the duration of a Russian winter, but there were other stockpiles as well. Yes, I said stockpiles. Not only the usual assortments of weapons, medical kits, and riot gear, but more exotic equipment, like surface-to-air missiles and a retrofitted Sherman tank. The pickup was, oddly enough, one of his more practical purchases. It sported tires big enough to house wayward children, an exhaust chimney, a reserve gas tank, and a camping tarp resembling something chewed up and spit out by the last Mad Max film. Ready? Gary asked, gunning the massive engine. Couldn't we just take the sedan? I asked, still feeling the ache in my legs from the 5-minute climb into the cab. I don't want to have to do this again for a very long time, he said, leveling his gaze on the end of the driveway and shifting into first. Gary pulled shades low over his eyes and the behemoth shuddered down the street. It had been at least a week since we'd gone out and had no clue what a ghost town the suburbs had become. Plastic grocery bags, or what I like to call urban tumbleweeds, blew across the road as we made our way to Costco. I could almost hear the soundtrack from every spaghetti western playing in the distance. We rolled up, parking further out, where our massive vehicles wouldn't scrape the compacts. What kinds of toilet paper you got in there? Gary asked, knowing full well we always bought the same kind. The lady glanced at our membership card, threw her head back, and gave a deep belly laugh. No, really, what are you guys here for? Just something to do the job, I said, pulling my doily away enough to speak. Can't remember the last time I saw a roll, the lady said. There are stories about some of the ma and pa stores carrying some of that gas station toilet paper, but I'd rather just use sandpaper from aisle 10. She grimaced. Sorry, forgot they cleaned that out after the diapers and soft t-shirts were gone. Took folks a little longer to go for the restaurant napkins, but now they're gone too. They'll be wiping their asses with cardboard soon. Gary nodded when he thought she was finished. Any chance one of the other stores might have some? You could try Walmart, but after the whole toilet paper train got hijacked last week, the truck drivers won't even haul the stuff. They tried rebranding the sides so it looked like they were shipping rubber duckies, but folks got wise to that. Next thing you know, no one could drive anything colored yellow or they'd get jumped at signal lights. Hell, my dad got taken down just because his VW van had a picture of Big Bird on the side. If he hadn't fended them off with a can of Raid and a cigarette lighter, Pa'd probably have, lost his t-shirt. Gary just kept nodding until she finally took a breath. How are they doing on paper towels? She looked sideways at us. Strange enough, we do got some of them left. You want to wipe your asses with some generic bounty sheets? Not bad if you get them wet enough. Gary shook his head. We'll keep looking. You were considering it, weren't you? I asked as we climbed back into the massive cab. Gary was out of breath from the climb and the thin air at that altitude, therefore taking a second to answer. I'm not that desperate. Yet. I shrugged. He had a point. As kids, we'd been in a similar situation after Dad got the bright idea to burn toilet paper soaked in gasoline during the winter. We'd gone through 10 rolls before realizing we'd used them all, and several days of being snowed in had not gone well. I still shudder at the memory. We drove from store to store collecting laughs everywhere we went. "Toilet paper?" an ancient greeter at Walmart said after he stopped cackling in an oddly high-pitched wheeze, tears still streaming down his red face as he said, "Well, boys, what kind you want? Charmin? Angel Soft? Hell, I keep forgetting what's down that aisle now. We've been storing exercise equipment there for a week. Woman gave birth on a yoga mat a few days ago. Cute kid once we hose him down with a super soaker from aisle 86. Gary sighed, glanced around and drew in close to the old man. "Okay, I get it. But anything you can do to hook me up, I can pay." The man glanced around, wheels turning in his head, probably wondering if we were cops. "Hell, boy, I know your dad, don't I?" "Probably," Gary said. "Everyone in town does." The man nodded. "Word is Elmer's got a stash at his place if you boys can get out there," he whispered. "Elmer?" Gary asked, narrowing his eyes. "How did crazy Elmer think to do that?" "He didn't," the man said. "His wife was getting into crafting and he got tired of running to the store every day for more. Thought he'd teach her a lesson by buying up everything he had for several months. Might be worth a shot." Gary nodded. "Thank you, sir," he whispered, tucking a 10 spot into the front of the greeter's apron. "You're a good man." And as you've probably already guessed, Crazy Man, much like Old Man, had become something of a title in our town, though it can only be applied to one name at a time. There were probably a variety of Elmers in the county, but everyone knew Crazy Man Elmer's place. We took 3 dirt roads and a long driveway, which might have been gravel at one time, but now looked like a small child had scattered a few rocks around and gone on to play with tree frogs. "Kind of dark, isn't it?" I asked Gary as we made for the rundown house. "I drove slow," Gary said. "Don't want anyone seeing us." There was no answer at the door, so we went around the side and made our way to the barn-like garage at the back. We glanced around a few times and knocked. A tiny window slid sideways and crusty eyes glared out at us. "What?" Crazy Man Elmer asked. Gary squared his shoulders and put on his best, though not very good, New York accent. "I heard you guys had some TP." Elmer stared past us into the darkness beyond. "You guys cops?" "Do we look like cops?" I asked, adopting a similar accent. He considered us for just under half a minute. "Standard, double, or mega roll?" he asked. "How many sheets?" Gary asked. 425 for the regular 6-pack. Mega's like having 18 rolls. Gary said, narrowing his eyes. "So, what's in a 12-pack? "Mega's like 36 rolls. "How many sheets is that?" I asked. "On to 12. 12 mega? Elmer rolled his eyes. "Hell, what do I look like, a human calculator? I got more TP back there than any man has ever seen, but I can't do toilet paper math. That's worse than trigonometry." "Fair enough," Gary said, shoving a wad of cash into the window. "Give me as many cases as this can buy." "Standard or mega?" "Dad likes mega," I said to Gary. "They don't fit in the mount." "How about double? They might fit." "Yeah, but Mom gets more tubes out of the standards." Gary sighed. "Gotta keep Mom happy." "Standard," he said, turning back to Elmer. A wide grin spread across the old man's face. "You got it." He helped us pile more toilet paper than I'd ever seen into the back of the truck and began tying it down with a Mad Max camo tarp. Before we'd fully battened down the goods, a strobe light flared from down the driveway, and sirens kicked in moments later. "You two in on this?" Elmer growled. Not a chance, Gary yelled. They must have followed us. Elmer made for his barn with impressive speed for a man that age, and there was a shotgun in his hand before we even knew what was happening. Per protocol, I ducked into the flatbed, while Gary leapt from the side down into the cab and gunned the engine. Buckshot rattled the pickup's exterior as the granny gun roared. Glancing out the back, I caught Elmer reloading and twisting to meet the oncoming police force, which consisted of at least 6 vehicles. Gary took no pause in flooring it and veered off into the old man's pasture. 5 of the vehicles stopped to surround their prey, drawing their weapons like a SWAT team at a bank robbery, but the 6th was an all-terrain SUV, and it followed us into the tall grass. My brother knew the fields and back roads better than most, and before I knew it, we were back on the dirt road, headed for the highway. "What do we do now?" I hollered, sliding the back window aside as I tried to hold the tarp down with one rope. "A few miles to the highway," Gary shouted back. "You've got to stop them." I slid back the tailgate as the cops gained on us. "Pull over or we'll fire," came the mechanical screech of the mounted bullhorn. Damn it! I hadn't thought to bring weapons, caltrops, a smoke screen, oil slick, anything. I cursed my ineptitude and Dad's lack of foresight in not having added spy hunter type accoutrements to this vehicle. "I got nothing," I screamed back at Gary. If he heard me, I couldn't tell. Blood thundered in my ears. Mom would never forgive us if we didn't bring home the goods. Dad would have nothing for the bathroom, and Mom would have nothing for the Martha Stewart show. I gripped one of the massive TP packs and tore it open, unleashing a cascade of white rolls out the back of the truck. Bouncing balls of toilet paper goodness leapt down the dirt road towards the cops, which skidded to a screeching halt. 2 men sprang from the SUV, launching themselves at the rolls as if trying to catch a pack of falling babies. "Damnation!" I yelled, crawling through the window into the cab after tying down the tarp. "How much did we lose?" Gary asked as I clipped on my seatbelt. "About the same as Mom used to recreate the Nativity last Christmas." Gary gritted his teeth and drove on. "Toilet paper Jesus," he said, shaking his head at the memory of the massive installation. "That's all we need. Another toilet paper Jesus."